Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be going over several of the array methods. These are functions that are built into the array prototype, which means that any array that you are working with, whether it's one you create or whether it's passed into your code from somewhere else, all of these arrays will have access to these methods because they're on the prototype. So these that I'm going to be showing you, they were introduced in ES5. Which means browser support is pretty much ubiquitous across the board. It's safe to use all of these functions that I'm going to be going over today. To kick things off, I'm going to talk a little bit about my environment. Like I said, support for this is pretty much green across the board. So you can just natively use this in JavaScript in the front end and also on the back end if you're using Node.js. Now, I'm going to be doing this example in Node.js, but the usage is no different. It's just where I'm writing my script. I'm writing it in a server code file versus something that's going to appear in a browser. You can test it out with either one. Also, I'm going to be using TypeScript today. You're actually not going to see anything different. So if you're not used to TypeScript, that's fine. I'm going to hide most of that from you. It's just to help me along the way so I don't make any silly mistakes as I'm typing along. So the first group of these, I call these the search methods. So let's say we have two arrays. One of them is called friends and it has several strings in there. Another one is response times with several numbers in there. So the first thing I want to do, I have this prompt for me, the indexOf array method. So this is built into every array. What is the index of Jack in the friends array? What about Jim? So to do that, we can say, let value equal, and we'll say friends.indexOf. And what do we pass in there? We pass in the element to search for. So that's going to be a string, Jack. And I'm going to console log value. Okay. Now the next part of that, I'm going to answer the second question. I'm going to be a little more concise this time. So console.log friends.indexOf, and this one's going to be Jim. All right, so let's see what logs on this line and this line. Now again, I've set up this node project. I have a script I'm going to run, npm start, but you just need to run your JavaScript however you are going to do it based on how you've set up your project. Okay, so for the first value, I get 3. For the second one, I get -1. So Jack, index of. So this is index 0, this is index 1, this is index 2, and Jack is index 3. So that's correct. And then Jim. Jim does not appear in this array, so index of returns -1 whenever it can't find that item. So that's useful, if you do index of and you get back -1, that's a signal to you that whatever you're looking for is not inside that array. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete these now. lastIndexOf, let's talk about that. So what is the index of 12.3 in response times? So I can console log response times dot index of 12.3. All right, what is the last index of 12.3? So console log response times dot last index of 12.3. Okay, let's see the result of that. So I'm going to run my code, and over here for the first answer I get 1, so index 0, index 1, so that's correct. And then the last index, so it's going to go through, and here's the last time it encounters it, and that is going to be in position 6 of the array, so that is correct as well. So those are two really simple methods you can use to find the index, find the location of something in an array. This next set, these are called, or I classify these as iteration methods. So these are methods that are going to assist us in iterating over data in arrays. So to help with this, I have some sample arrays set up here. We have set1, it's a series of numbers, same with set2. I also have an array of objects. I don't want you to get stuck thinking that this only works with really simple values. You can do these tasks with arrays of objects as well. So here we have an array of orders. Each order consists of a total and a payment method. So the first method I want to talk about that's built into every array is every. So let's answer this question. Is every value in set 1 even? So what the every method does, it will test for a particular predicate. So what that means is we specify some type of test, and the function every will return true or false depending on if every single item in that array passes that predicate, passes that truth test. Let me show you an example of what I mean. So is every value in set 1 even? So what I want to do here is I'm going to say let, and we'll just call this answer. So let answer equal set1 dot every. And what we put here is the predicate, or in this case it's a callback, and it allows us to evaluate a predicate. And what I need to do here, I'm going to put a function here, and the first thing that comes back is the value. And we can see VS Code is helping us out here. So value, index, array. You know, I have limited space here. I don't need access to all 3 of these things. I actually, at this moment in time, I only care about the value. So I'm only going to specify a parameter for the value. And in here, we have to return something. And what we return is something that evaluates to true or false. So what happens is set 1, there is an implicit loop. We can't see the loop, but behind the scenes, this function that I've specified right here is going to be invoked for, let's say there are 20 items in the array. This function will be invoked 20 times, and each time the current value in the array will be dropped into this parameter. So what I need to do is I need to say if the value mod2 is equal to 0, I'm going to return true. Otherwise, I'm going to return false. And so what every is doing, the goal of every is to determine if every element meets this predicate. So the predicate is every element even? So as soon as we encounter an else, as soon as we return false, every actually stops, right? There's no need to keep going because the question is every element going to return true? As soon as it encounters one that returns false, it can stop and say the answer is no, false. But if it keeps going and every element's returning true, then every will return true. So if I console log this, I'm going to console log that answer. So that gets stored in here. This is going to be true or false. So let's see what's going on there. So I'm going to run my script. And I get false, right? So let's take a look at set 1. So there's 7 right there. So that would have failed. So every is going to return false. Now, there are some ways. This is how it would look in ES5, which is when every was introduced and stabilized. But now, you know, it's 2018 at the time of this video. We can start using ES6 arrow functions. So what I can do is I can transform this into an arrow function. So I can get rid of the word function. I can put my arrow there with an equal sign and a greater than symbol. And, you know, that makes it a little shorter, not quite. But then this is actually just basic. We can do a basic shorthand here to transform this, right? We're saying if this is true, return true, otherwise return false. But you could actually simplify this to just say return value mod2 is equal to 0. And then we could actually get rid of these 5 lines of code. Because when this is true, we're just going to return true. But if it's false, we're going to return false. So we can simplify that a lot. Like it's already much simpler. So that cleaned that up. But with arrow expressions, with arrow functions, we can do things that are even more concise. And sometimes these can make the code less readable, unfortunately. But if you're the type of person who likes to minimize things and fit it on one line, then you'll probably want to take advantage of these shorthands. The first one is that if the arrow function has a single parameter, you can drop the parentheses around it. That is perfectly okay to do. The second shorthand is that if the function body is only returning a value, then you can actually get rid of the curly braces. All right. And the word return. So when you, and the semicolon. So when you have some type of expression directly after the arrow right here, then the shorthand is that this value is going to be returned. So this is saying for every item in the array, drop it into this parameter called value, and then return the result of this test. Value mod 2 is equal to 0. So is it even or not? True or false? So that's how we do that. Now we could even put this in a variable. So you could say something like let is even equal value mod 2 is equal to 0. All right. And then this could be simplified even more. We could just say is even. So go through set 1 and check and see if every element in there passes this test, this function that returns true or false given a value. All right, let's verify that this is still going to return false and I haven't changed anything. I'm running my code. I still have false here. But now that I've put this in a variable, this is going to make it a little easier for me. Is every value in set 2 even? Okay, so I can now say answer equals set2 dot every even. Oh, is even. Console log my answer. All right, let me run that code. Okay, that time I got true for that second answer there. And so let's look at that. Is each of these numbers even? Yes. Okay, so the final test here, well, next to the final, was every order paid with card? So how can we do this? Well, let me go ahead and clear these out. Was every order paid with card? So here's my orders array, and I want to know if every order had a method equal to card. So what I can do is I can say let all card equal orders dot every, and in here I'm going to have my order, and I'll say return order.method is equal to card. Okay, so this is something that's either going to be true or false. So again, this callback here, this gets invoked for each order in the orders array, and I have access to that full order now, that full item in the array, which is an object literal in this case with properties total and method. So I'm returning, and this is my Boolean expression. This is going to be true or false. Is the order method card? Okay, and all card will be true if this returns true for every single item in the array. So let me console log all card. Let's run that. False, because we can see one of them was cash. Okay. What about the next one? Was every order over $10? So and we'll just call this Boolean let over 10 equal orders.every. We could return order.total greater than 10. And this one should be true because we can see our totals here and they're over 10. And let's see. Oh, I forgot to console log over 10. Right? So orders.every is returning into a variable, and then I'm console logging that variable now. So let's run this. It should be true. And there it is, true for the last one. Again, this could have been written more concisely. So if you wanted on one line, it could have been order and then order.total greater than 10. Well, I don't have enough space for it to fit on one line, but you get the idea. So again, this is taking advantage of ES6 arrow functions and their shorthands to be able to fit it on one line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete these. Let's move on to the sum function. So every is going to return true or false if every single item in the array passes that truthy predicate, that truth test. Sum is going to to return true if just one of them, right? We're asking is it true that some of these items pass this test, okay? So are some values in set 1 even? So or we can just immediately console log, it doesn't really matter. And this is going to be set1.sum, and I'm going to pass in is even. So that's that arrow expression that I conveniently have stored up here. It is an arrow expression, it's named is even, and it takes in a value as parameter and it returns the result of checking to see if it's even, basically. If its modulus by 2 is equal to 0. All right, are some values in set 2 odd? So I'm going to console log set2.sum. I don't have a one already stored in a variable, so I've got to make a new one. So that'll be value, return value, mod 2 is equal to 1. All right, so when you mod by 2 and you have 1 left over, then that means it's odd. So let's run this. And for the first result, I get true. For the second result, I get false. Okay, so are some values in set 1 even? Yes, 2 is even. So actually, as soon as it encounters that very first one, it stops that behind the scenes loop, right? There's no need to waste resources because as soon as it sees 1, the question was, are some true? Are some of them even in this case? So it can stop its work. It doesn't need to waste any effort. The second one here, are some values in set 2 odd? So it checks 14, no, that's even. 52, no, that's even. 56, no, that's even. And 24 also fails. So that time it's going to make it all the way through and at the very end return false, which it did, because it is not true that some of these are even. Oh, sorry, are odd, right? So that's what we were checking for in this one, and they're all even, so none of them are odd. Okay. Are some of the orders paid with cash? Okay, so we have 3 orders. Are some of them paid with cash? Let's see. So I'm going to say we'll just say let sum cash equal orders dot sum, and there's my I get called every time. There's my order, and I'm gonna say, let me do the shorthand. I'm going to say return order dot method is equal to cash, and then console log sum cash. So is it true that out of all of those orders, at least one of them was paid for with cash? And I see that the last one here is true. Okay, so that's from this line, and there it is, right? It gets to the very first item and it says cash. All right, I can stop work right now because I know the answer. It's true that some of these orders were paid for with cash. Okay, so there is some. Let me delete these to make room. All right, this last one here, forEach. This is useful if you need to access every element in an array and maybe do something with that data, maybe send it somewhere, maybe just print it out. In this example, I'm going to print out the details of every order. So for that one, I'm going to say orders.forEach. And again, I'm going to put an arrow function in here that receives the order. And what we can do is we can then, in the function body, console log the order. All right, let me go ahead and save that and run it. So this is what that code output looks like. And there it goes. It is console logging each of those orders in turn. So as you've seen so far, and actually for all of these, what's going on is behind the scenes, there is a loop running, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. We don't have to go and create these loops. We can just take advantage of these really convenient functions, because most of the time we're trying to get the answer to a question. We're trying to solve a problem. And why should we have to waste time writing out a for loop, setting the index to 0, specifying the condition, specifying I++? Why do we have to write that code over and over for these simple tasks? So that's why we want to take advantage of these methods that are built into arrays now. So instead of having to write a for loop and accessing the array at index I and console logging it, this is much simpler, right? Just, hey, for every single order, run this function, giving me the current order, and then we just console log the current order. So that is forEach. Now, this last group here, I call these the transform methods. So these are methods that you can use to look at existing data and compute brand new data based on that existing data. So it's not going to alter the existing data. You're just creating a new copy of data from that existing data. So let me show you a few examples of what I mean. So I have set3 and set4. These are sample arrays with numbers in there. And then I have exam scores, which is an array of objects with properties name and result. So these are scores that some people made on an exam. So the first function, you're going to see this one a lot, is the map function. So what map does is it lets you, it's very similar to a forEach, okay? It's going to loop through and execute a callback function for every element in the array. But whatever you return inside that callback function is being collected up into a brand new array. So you can work with an array of data and then create an array of output data. And this is your chance to transform data, modify it in some way, compute something from the input data, and have this output data. So this one's best explained with some examples. So let's look at this prompt. Create a new array with values that are double those of set 3. So here's set 3. We have 12, 17, 22, 29, and 31. So if we were doing this from scratch, we'd have to create a new array, we'd have to create a for loop, we'd go through set 3, find the double of each number, push that answer into the empty array, and at the very end we'd have our result array with all of these doubled numbers. Let's see how easy this is with map. What I want to do is I want to call let doubled equal, and I'll say set3.map. And value is going to be the current number as it's implicitly looping through this array. And what I want to do is I want to return value times 2. Okay, so in the callback, you return what you want to be. So let's say we're in the very first position in the input array, index 0. Whatever you return here is going to go into index 0 of the new array that's being created. So I'm not touching the original array, but I'm returning some type of data to put into this copy that we're making on the fly, this new array with some type of transformed data. So what I would expect is that if I console log doubled, then when I run this script, I'm going to get 24, 34, 44, 58, and 62, which are the doubles of these values. All right, so the next one is probably the same thing, but with set 4. So let's go ahead and do that. So this time doubled is going to be equal to set4.map. And I'll show you the concise shorthand this time. So given the value, I'm going to return the value times 2. Console log doubled. All right, much more concise, just same thing, arrow function. No parentheses around a single argument. No curly braces around a value that you're going to return. You're returning value times 2, so you don't put return, you don't put curly braces. You just put it to the right of the arrow. All right, so let's see this in action. And for this one, I see 2, 4, 6, 8, which is correct because this was 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so we've got that. And finally, create a new array with just the names of the people who took the exam. So, don't get stuck thinking about numbers. This extends into objects too. So here are the exam scores. And I want to create an array of strings consisting of just the names of the people, okay? So here's what it looks like, exam scores. It's an array of objects, name and result. So what I want to do is I want to say we'll say test takers, equal exam scores dot map, and given a well, what do we call one of them? I guess a score record. Given a score record, I want to return just score record dot name. So just the name data from that object instead of the. So if this is score record, I want just score record dot name. Okay, and so I am returning that. And so test taker should be an array of just those strings, just those names. Let's see. So I've saved that. I'm going to run my script now. And I get John, Josie, and James. All right. So if you're doing something, this comes up particularly in, so if you're working with React, this comes up a lot because many times you get data back, but you need to return like list items, or it happens a lot when you're working with lists in React. So it lets you take some type of data and return these elements that contain that data. That's a really popular use case of map when you're working with React. Okay, so that's the map function. Let me go ahead and clear these out. All right. And let's move on to filter. So filter is really cool. What filter does is it lets you create a filtered down version of your original array. So basically you can say, all right, I want a copy of this array, but I only want to keep things that pass this test. All right. So it's a little different than like sum or every, because that was just telling you, it was answering a question, you know, does every element in this array pass this test? Do some elements in this array pass the test? And the final result was yes or no, true or false. With filter, we are creating a filtered list. We're saying, give me the elements in the array that pass the test. Okay, so let's do that. We will say let evens equal set3 dot filter. And again, we just need to pass in a callback that's going to run that predicate. It's going to return true or false. And actually, I can just use my arrow expression I made way up here earlier in the example. So instead of just typing this over and over, I have it in a variable called isEven. Value, it checks if it's even or not. So what I'm going to do is come down here and pass in isEven. All right. And so let's see, so console log evens. Let me go ahead and run that. All right, so only the even values from set 3. So that should be 12, 22. Yeah, just 12 and 22, and that's what I'm seeing here. Okay. The next prompt is create a new array containing only the exam score records for people who scored 95 or higher. All right, so let's take a look at that data again. There's 99, 100, and 92. So we want to check for the result, making sure it's 95 or higher. So we're going to say let superstars equal exam scores dot filter. And in here, we'll just call this again score record. And we can return score record dot result greater than or equal to 95. So again, I'm using the, well, I didn't fully use it. I'm using an arrow expression with shorthands to get rid of all the stuff. And so I'm going to console log superstars. So if I did this correctly, then what we should see is just the people who took the exam, just the score records for people who scored 95 or higher. So let me go ahead and run that. Okay, so that's from earlier. Here's the array. There's an object, John, result 99, Josie, result 99. And so that looks good. Importantly, James didn't make the cut, okay? Because James, the result was not 95 or greater. James was not included in the filter. So he was filtered out of the results here. So again, with filter, you return true on stuff you want to keep in the final output array. Okay. All right, this next one, reduce. This one's really cool. When I was first, getting into JavaScript, I was a little afraid of this function, but I use it a lot more now that I fully understand, its usefulness and how it works. What reduce does is it takes a collection of data, in this case an array, and it allows you the end goal is to reduce it down to a single value. And so this is used anytime you have a lot of data and you are, achieving one result. Now, a lot of these things we've already talked about, like each and, every and some, these, could be implemented using reduce. They're kind of special cases of reduce. You've taken this data and you are boiling it down and getting one result back. But reduce is very flexible, and by using the reduce method, we can compute our own reducers, our own functions that boil down data into a simple value. So this is another one that's best understood using an example. Here's our prompt. Compute the sum of the values in set 3. And we're also going to do it for set 4. So back up here, set 3. We have these numbers, we want to add them all together basically. We could easily do this with a for loop, but why reinvent the wheel? Why have to write that loop every time when we can just use reduce? So for that, I'm going to say let sum equal set3 dot reduce. And for this one, this arrow function, the first parameter, I'm going to call this ACC. And the next one, I'm going to call this value. So what exactly is going on here? And then I'll console log sum. What exactly is this? Well, this one's a little different. The first parameter in this callback function here is for the accumulator. So when you're using reduce, the accumulator is some type of value that is persistent between each of these callback invocations. As we're going through, it is that final value that we are building up to, right? In this case, it's going to be the running sum that we're creating. And then this value here is the current position or the current value in the array. So 12, 17, 22, 29. So each time this callback is run, and it's run for every item in the array, ACC is the current value of the accumulator, or whatever you want to call this, it's just a parameter. And then the second parameter is going to be the value at that position in the array. So what I want to do here is I'm going to return ACC plus value. So I want to take the existing value of the accumulator and add the current number onto it. And at the end, let's console log this sum. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start this. And I get 111. So that is the result of adding up all of these numbers, 12, 17, 22, 29, and 31. Adding all those up, you get 111. We could write this a little shorter. So because we're just returning a value, we could just say ACC plus value without curly braces. Okay. Can't drop the parentheses here because we have two parameters. So that's got to stay. But this can be a return shorthand. All right, so that is for set 3. Now let's do sum equals set4 dot reduce. Again, ACC and value, return ACC plus value. So we're going to console log the sum. So let's see what that one looks like. So we should see 111, and we should also see, let's see, so 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so 10. That's the result of adding all of them. So what exactly is going on here? Well, the accumulator starts as the first element in the array. So I think this is going to be simplest to walk through with with set 4. So accumulator started as 1, and because of that, it actually started the callbacks on the second element in the array. So that's important to note. It doesn't start with 1 as the accumulator and then run the first element again, because then your answer would be wrong. So it started with 1 as the accumulator and 2 as the value. So we said return 1 plus 2. So that's going to be 3. So then it moves on and it says, all right, the accumulator right now is 3. That's the sum so far. And the current value is 3. So it adds those together. That's going to be 6. So now on this last one, we say the accumulator is 6, and we're going to add the current value, which is 4. That gives us 10, and then that's the end. So that's why we logged 10 there. So again, the accumulator is, it starts by default as the very first number in the array, and then you just mutate that as you go along. You transform that by adding to it, subtracting to it, multiplying it, something like that. So that is reduce. Let's get a little more practice on that one. So compute the product of all the values in set 3 and set 4. Okay, so let product equal set3.reduce. And again, we're going to have ACC and value, and we're going to return ACC times value. And not produce, it's going to be product. And let's do the same thing for set 4. So product is going to be equal to set4.reduce. And console log the product again. Okay, so for set 3, if you multiply all those numbers together, you're going to get this very large number here. And for set 4, this one's easy to check. If we multiply all of them together, we get 4, 8, 12, and then 24, and then 24 times 1. So that gives us 24. So multiplying all of them together gave us 24. And that's what we wanted. So we reduced that array of data into a single answer, a single value. All right, this final one, compute the average of all the values in set 3. So how can we do that? How exactly can we compute the average? So for that one, I'm going to say let AVG equal set3.reduce. And this one's going to be a little different, actually. This one, I'm not going to use any shorthands because we need everything we can get. I'm going to get the accumulator. I'm also going to get the current value. And I'm going to keep going. Accumulator and value, that's pretty much the bare minimum that you need. But with this one, you can also request the index. So that's going to be 0, 1, 2. That's the current index in the original array that it's looping through. And we can keep going and actually get the entire array. So ARR, that's going to be actually the same as set 3. And what I want to do is I'm going to say, all right, you're giving me ACC. You're giving me the accumulator. By default, it's the first item in the array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say ACC. I'm going to increment you by the value. Now this is a shorthand. If you're not familiar with it, it's ACC equals ACC plus value. So let's just do that. So I'm increasing ACC by the value. So if it started out as 12 and then value was 2, it's going to become 14. And now I'm going to check something. I'm going to say if index is less than ARR.length minus 1. So in other words, if we're not on the last item in the original array, then we are going to return the accumulator that's been modified, right? It was modified right here. Otherwise, that means we are on the last item in the array. We're going to return the accumulator divided by ARR.length. So that's going to be the number of items in the original array. So at this point, again, this is at the very end after we've incremented the accumulator, and it's the final value, last iteration of the loop. Then here's the sum. Basically, it was computing the sum all along. Here's the sum, and then we're going to return the sum divided by how many items were in the original array, and that will give us the average. So let's check that out. I'm going to console log AVG. I'm going to go ahead and run that. Okay, so I got 22.2, which is the average if you add all those numbers up and divide them by 5. Okay, so if you need some time to look at that, just pause the video, take a look. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. All right, And now the final one is reduceRight. Same thing, but instead of starting from the left, it actually starts from the right, which you might think will always cause the same result. Sometimes that's true, like if you're doing addition or multiplication, but sometimes it can cause completely different results. For example, consider this prompt. Compute the result of subtracting values in set 4 starting from the left. So instead of computing a sum, we're going to compute a running difference, I guess. So we start with the first number and then subtract the second number and then subtract the third number and so on. So right now, this first example, I'm not going to use reduceRight. I'm going to just use reduce, okay? So for this one, we'll say we'll say RR for reduceRight. Let RR answer equal, and what am I doing? Set 4. Set 4.reduce. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to say that given the accumulator and the value, I'm going to return the accumulator minus the value. Okay? Let's console log that. And finally, I'm going to say RR is equal to set4.reduceRight. And again, ACC, given those two things, I'm going to return ACC minus val. Okay, and then let's console log that answer. So this is just to show you that these two answers are actually going to be different. So I'm going to go ahead and run this script. I get -8 the first time, -2 the second time. Why is that? So let's look up here. Here's set 4. The accumulator starts as 1. We say 1 minus 2. So that gives us -1. So the accumulator is now -1. Then we subtract 3. So the accumulator is now -4. And then we subtract 4. So the accumulator is now -8. So that's where the first one came from. So now let's do reduceRight. Same logic, same predicate, but we're going to start from the right side. So the accumulator starts out as +4. And then we're going to subtract 3. That gives us 1. So the accumulator is 1. Now we're going to subtract 2. So that gives us -1. So now the accumulator is -1. And then we're going to subtract 1 from that, which gives us -2, which was the final result. So that's just an idea of when you're going to, or how reduceRight works. So sometimes you might run across an example where you would want to do that. But anyways, why do we use these? These are something that come with time and skill and experience. You know, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, and it's just a lot. It's very helpful to know these functions that are built into arrays. The browser support is tremendous, so why not use these things? It's only going to save you time. It's going to make your code more concise and honestly just cooler, okay? So instead of having to write loops all the time and using array index I to get the current value and keep track of something, returning true as soon as you encounter this thing, returning false if you never encounter it. Instead of having to do all that logic yourself, it's best to use these tools that you put your data in, you specify your predicate using some type of callback function, and you're going to get the answer you want. You're either going to get a yes or no answer, you're going to get a filtered response, something like that. So again, I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, sound off in the comments. If you like what you see, check out the other videos on our channel, and please subscribe. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a good day.